Hi, my name is Jack Rackham, and today I'm going to be showing you a few of the family trees of Hollywood, and the granddaddy of them all, the Barrymores. Like you might expect, the story of families in Hollywood only grows more complicated and more distant from reality with each passing generation. So, to dip our toes in, Matt has organized these family trees by the number of generations in each. So first, we have families that weren't born into Hollywood, but where a bunch of siblings all came up together. For instance, the Baldwins. You probably know Alec Baldwin from his Trump impersonation on Saturday Night Live or from his role on 30 Rock. But he also has three brothers, Stephen, Daniel, and William, who all starred in a number of films in the 1990s. It's a similar story for the Wayans family. Keenan Wayans created the sketch comedy series In Living Color, which ran for 5 seasons in the early 90s, and all of his siblings were featured as actors on the show. Another interesting similarity, Damon Wayans is also an SNL alum. Then we have some two-generation families. In the case of the Sheens, there was Martin Sheen, best known for Apocalypse Now and his role as the president in the West Wing TV series, who was the first one to break into Hollywood, and a few years later, his son Charlie Sheen began appearing on screen as well. He's best known for the sitcom 2.5 Men. In 2010, he was the highest-paid TV actor in the world, and then in 2011, he was abruptly canceled, following surfacing reports of substance abuse and domestic abuse. He also has a brother, Emilio Estevez, who starred in The Breakfast Club. Next, the Smith family. Will Smith is very much a household name, making his big break on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and appearing in many movies since then, not to mention becoming the hottest meme of YouTube Rewind 2018. He's married to Jada Pinkett Smith, who's appeared in over 20 films, including the Madagascar series and sequels to The Matrix and Scream, and both of their children have acted alongside their father. Moving along to third-generation families, we have the Sutherlands. Kiefer Sutherland is perhaps the most recognizable name of the bunch, best known for his starring role in the show 24, but his daughter Sarah Sutherland had a significant role in the show Veep, and his father was the original face of Hawkeye Pierce in the MASH movie. Kiefer's mother also had a career in acting, though she was less known. An interesting note for Canadian viewers, though, she was the daughter of the famous Canadian politician Tommy Douglas. Another third-generation Hollywood family is the Reynolds. Debbie Reynolds was a famous actress who performed in the tail end of the golden age of Hollywood, best known for her starring role in Singin' in the Rain. Both of her children went on to work in Hollywood, though better known than Todd Fisher is Carrie Fisher. And even if you somehow aren't familiar with her name, that hairstyle is enough to tell you what role she's known for. Her daughter Billie Lourd has also gone into acting, appearing alongside her mother in the most recent Star Wars trilogy. Then there's the Douglas family. No relation to Tommy Douglas this time. Kirk Douglas was another famous Golden Age actor who died just over a year ago at the age of 103. He starred in the Broadway adaptation of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was later made into a very famous film produced by Michael Douglas. Although Michael is best known for playing Gordon Gekko in 1987's Wall Street. He has a son named Cameron Douglas who isn't as well known, but he did appear in one movie alongside both his father, grandfather, and grandmother. The next tree is also 3 generations long, but a bit wider. Francis Ford Coppola is the critically acclaimed director of the Godfather trilogy. During the production of those movies, he cast several of his family members. His sister Talia was featured in all 3 movies as Connie Corleone. His daughter played the role of Connie's newborn son, and his father, wife, mother, and 2 sons all appeared as extras. But many of these people had big careers in their own right. Talia is best known for her starring role in Rocky, and his father Carmen was a composer. Another name you might recognize, Francis Ford Coppola's nephew, is none other than Nicolas Cage. He changed his name a long time ago in order to have a career of his own apart from his family name recognition. Also appearing in the third Godfather movie was Bridget Fonda. She's the daughter of Peter Fonda, an actor/writer/director who was a part of 1960s counterculture, and the niece of Jane Fonda, an award-winning actress who starred in a bunch of movies in the 70s. She holds 2 Oscars, 7 Golden Globes, a Primetime Emmy, and the record for best-selling VHS tape of all time, a record unlikely to be broken anytime soon. And that tape was for an exercise routine. Her father, Henry Fonda, though holding fewer accolades, was still a big-shot actor in his day, which is to say a span of 5 decades in which he starred in a number of westerns and war epics. Last up, before we get to tonight's main feature, the Barrymores, are the Gums. Frank and Ethel Gum were actually vaudeville performers who ran a movie theater in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Their daughter, Judy Garland, is remembered today for playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, as well as for her somewhat tragic personal life behind the scenes. She had a daughter, Liza Minnelli, who also did song and dance on the silver screen, rising to fame in Cabaret, though I suspect my generation might recognize her from Arrested Development. Now, as you can see already, the Barrymore family is larger than any of these families we've covered so far, but as we pan over, you can see it gets even bigger. If anyone deserves to be called an acting dynasty, it's the Barrymores. Acting in the family began not just before the movies, but before the invention of the photograph. Eliza and Thomas Lane, both born in the 1700s, were both actors and managed a theater. Their daughter, Louisa Lane, was something of a prodigy. She traveled a great deal as a young woman and became very popular. Here you can see a picture of her performing as Ophelia. She even appeared in several plays with one of the biggest celebrities of the day, John Wilkes Booth. She and her husband, John Drew, also an actor, later assumed management of the Arch Street Theater in Philadelphia, though Louisa continued acting all her life. Louisa had 3 children, Georgiana, or Georgie, and John Jr. from her first husband, and Sidney, whom she mysteriously adopted shortly after her husband's death and after she had been away in the countryside for a few months. Likely, he was her child, either by her late husband or a lover. Sidney was also the only one of that generation to pursue a career in film, as Georgie died young and John Jr. remained on the stage. He was most known for his Mr. and Mrs. Sidney Drew act that he had adapted from the stage, footage of which still exists today. Mrs. Drew was Gladys Rankin, who also came from an acting family, although most of her relatives also performed primarily on the stage. She died before her husband, however, and after a brief stand-in, the role was taken up by Sidney's second wife, Lucille McVeigh. John Jr., as I mentioned, remained on the stage. He was a matinee idol, or in other words, a heartthrob. He had one daughter who premiered on Broadway at the age of 19, but she retired in 1917. She also had a son, John Drew DeVrew, who performed on Broadway. Georgiana Drew acted in a number of Broadway hits, but died of tuberculosis at the age of 36 in 1893. However, she had 3 children with her husband Maurice Barrymore, whom she had met backstage in one of her Broadway shows. He was an Englishman, born in British India and a Broadway star who made an unexpected leap into vaudeville. He would later quit the stage in a very dramatic fashion when, in the middle of his monologue, he suddenly went off script and went on an incoherent tirade against Jews. His erratic behavior continued, and he was checked into a hospital where he was diagnosed with incurable syphilis. But, as I said, they had 3 children. John, Ethel, and Lionel, all 3 of whom would enter into the American Theater Hall of Fame. Previous generations in the family had been stars, but these 3 were national icons. Ethel had a lifelong career as an actress. She was forced to work as a teenager after her mother died, but instead of working in a factory, she was on Broadway at 16 years old. She performed on the stage for a while, including once with her cousin Louise, but she ultimately moved to film in 1914, where she became successful in silent films. With the advent of talking pictures, it was often difficult for silent stars to transition, but as it happens, some of Ethel's best work was in talkies. She won an Oscar in 1944, starred in a Hitchcock film in 47, and was nominated for another Academy Award in 49. She also adapted to the new media of radio and television, and gave her final performance in 1957. She had 3 children who all went on to work in Hollywood, and though none became household names, her daughter Ethel was cast on Broadway in a Stephen Sondheim musical in the 70s. Lionel Barrymore wasn't super interested in theater, but appeared alongside his grandmother in one of her last stage performances in the 1890s. The curtain call on her career turned out to be the opening number for his, as he quickly met with success. He briefly tried to make a name for himself as a painter, as visual art was his real passion, but ultimately he would return to the stage. In the silent era, he was already well entrenched in Hollywood, having made over 60 films with D.W. Griffith, the prolific director who made over 500 films and created the first blockbuster. Unfortunately, that was Birth of a Nation, which was largely responsible for the resurgence of the KKK. Lionel's first marriage was to Doris Rankin, who was the sister to Sidney Drew's first wife, Gladys. In other words, Gladys was both Lionel's aunt and his sister-in-law. His second marriage was to a former lover of his brother John named Irene Fenwick, also an actress. Lionel won an Academy Award for his 1931 performance in A Free Soul, but he's best known today for playing the Scrooge-like Mr. Potter in the Christmas classic It's a Wonderful Life. He was once going to play the role of Scrooge as well, but was passed over for another actor due to him requiring a wheelchair. His brother John is the one that continues the line that contains today's celebrity Drew Barrymore. Like his brother Lionel, he tried to carve out a path for himself as an artist, but after appearing alongside his family members, he took to the stage for a living. He was a great tragic actor, winning tremendous critical acclaim for portraying Hamlet, then moving to the screen and performing the lead roles in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Sherlock Holmes, and an adaptation of Moby Dick. But his personal life was far from glamorous. He was plagued by alcoholism, eventually filed bankruptcy, and divorced 4 times. His first wife, Catherine Corey Harris, was an actress who appeared in a couple silent films with him that are now lost. The name of his second spouse was Strange, Michael Strange. Born Blanche Marie-Louise Ulrichs, Michael was a pen name adopted in order to publish poetry, and the name most remembered today. It was supposedly this interest in poetry that drove a wedge between Michael and John, although Michael would later go on to have a romantic relationship with children's book author Margaret Wise Brown in the 40s, so it's not unthinkable that John's reaction to Michael being queer might have had something to do with the divorce, and alcoholism wouldn't have helped. Before the divorce, they did have 3 children together, including Diana Barrymore, who worked as an actress in the 40s. Dolores Costello was John's co-star in 1926 and his wife in 1928. She also came from an acting family and was prolific enough to be dubbed the goddess of the silent screen. Her sister and mother were film actresses, and her father was a vaudeville actor. During his third marriage, John suffered a mental breakdown on set. Thankfully, not live and involving no diatribe against the Jewish people, but for multiple days he couldn't remember his lines or the name of his character. Afraid of being locked away like his father, he left the country for a couple years, and when he came back, he began an affair with a 19-year-old fan. He was 53. They married within a year. John and Dolores had a son named John Drew Barrymore, who grew up with little interaction with his father. He got a lead role in his second movie, but his films didn't perform as well in the box office as those of his family members. Effectively, he inherited all of his family's baggage and none of the acclaim. He worked in television for a few years, then faced a series of arrests involving a drunk hit-and-run and a drunken fight with his wife in a parking lot. Shut out of Hollywood and divorced, he went to Italy to work as an actor there, then came back a number of years later announcing he'd changed. He did some more TV, including guest appearances on Gunsmoke and Star Trek, but he continued to face arrests and charges of drug use and spousal abuse. He became reclusive, married and divorced 3 more times, became estranged from his children, and died in 2004. And now, the one name you probably knew going into this, Drew Barrymore. Though she had landed a role in E.T. as a child, she had a very, very difficult childhood. By age 15, she had become dependent on drugs and alcohol, survived 2 suicide attempts, been through rehab twice, and was living on her own. Enough to fill the pages of an autobiography, which she did at age 16. But after that point, while she continued to play the rebellious teen on screen, she was able to shake off the very adult troubles that plagued her childhood. She since starred in a number of films you've probably heard of: Batman Forever, Scream, Charlie's Angels, and Donnie Darko, to name a few. She had 2 short-lived marriages around the turn of the century and was married to Ari Kopelman for a few years, in which time they had 2 children. She stated she doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of her father and has kept her kids' lives private and gone on record saying she doesn't want them to act until they're adults. And that wraps up the Barrymore Dynasty. As always, let us know if you'd be interested in seeing more of these kind of pop culture family trees, and make sure to subscribe to catch a new video every Friday. Thanks for watching.